You will find in the world of signals and of electronics two basic types of signals, analog and digital. In analog signals, a current is varied smoothly to show information. However, digital signals use pulses of currents to represent information.
Semiconductors are defined as materials that cannot block electrical flow as well as insulators, yet cannot let electricity flow as well as conductors. They are used in order to transmit electrical signals. Semiconductors are created by mixing elements that have high resistance in pure forms with others that don't have such high resistance. There are two different types of semiconductors, the N-type and the P-type. The N-type, or negative semiconductors, are made when you add an element with extra electrons to conductors. And the P-type, or positive semiconductors, are made when you add an element with an electron hole. The layering of these types create a delicate control of flowing current.
Okay. When you join several semiconductors together, you get what is called a semiconductor device. One of these devices is called a diode. A diode is consisted of a P and N-type semiconductor joined together. These are usually used as switches or to change from alternating current to direct current. Another one of these devices is called a transistor. A transistor is formed when one type of semiconductor is sandwiched by two of the opposite type. They also have two possible uses, to amplify electric signals and to switch currents on and off. These things combined together create integrated circuits, which we all know as computer chips.
Telephones are composed of three major parts and work by transforming sound into an electrical signals and back into sound. One part of a telephone, the transmitter, transforms the sound wave of a person speaking to an electrical signal when the sound waves strike a metal disc in the transmitter. The opposite of the transmitter, the receiver, works in a similar way, except that there is usually a semiconductor on the metal disc that will measure the power of the electrical signal and send it out as a sound. The final part, the dialing mechanism, uses the different tones of the different numbers and sends them as electrical signals to the telephone company.
Sound, like we heard from the telephone, can be transferred into electrical signals. This is how we record things. You can find analog sound in things like records. The tiny grooves in the record and the waves they make are followed by a stylus, which sends the waves into an amplifier, then into a speaker. Digital sound can be found in things like CDs. In CDs, there are tiny pits and flats. A light will pass over these and become reflected from the pits, which will then send the step information to an amplifier and then a speaker so that you can hear it.
Change of an electric. You have heard of electromagnets before. Electromagnetic waves are simply the result of the change of an electric or a magnetic field, which will then create an electromagnetic wave. And using an electromagnetic wave, you can change the amplitude and frequency of it to carry an electrical signal. In amplitude modulation, known as AM, you'll have the carrier electromagnetic wave vary to the strength of the electrical signal. In frequency modulation, also known as FM, you'll find that the space between the carrier wave will depend on the electrical signal.
Voices or music you hear on the AM and FM are electronic signals carried by an electromagnetic wave. But where do the sounds come from? In the transmission or sending of the sound, the process begins at a radio station. When a musician plays into a mic, the sound waves create a varying electric current. This is an analog signal, which is then sent to a transmitter and amplifier, which spreads it by an antenna. Your radio receives this by its own antenna, which you will connect to the specific frequency which will be amplified and played out of a speaker.
Now we must ask the question, how does a TV set change a video signal into the image you see on the screen? Most televisions use cathode ray tubes, which contain solid fluorescent materials that transform beams of electrons into tiny colored dots of three primary colors: red, green, and blue. Your eyes patch this together into images you see. The newer flat-screen TVs produce their images by sending their video signals to a liquid crystal or plasma. In the plasma TV, the signal heats tiny pockets of gases, causing them to glow in different colors.
A pulley is one of the simple machines and is composed of a groove wheel with a rope or cable wrapped around it. A pulley works by pulling on one end of the rope, creating an input force. At the other end, the output force pulls up the object. Pulleys can be useful for two reasons: to decrease the input force to lift something, and to change the direction of the input force. There are three types of pulleys: a fixed, movable, and block and tackle pulley. A fixed pulley doesn't change the force applied, but changes the direction. A movable pulley decreases the amount of input force, but doesn't change the direction of the force. Finally, a block and tackle pulley is a pulley that consists of both movable and fixed pulleys.